Economy, Nathan Elliott from Insight West, Sean Kelly from EMCO, Brian Langan from the Richard Ivey School of Business, Jacob Hope from Aspen Medical Canada, and Krista Watson from the Government of Saskatchewan Ministry of the Economy. Competitors will have 23 minutes to present. I will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking is permitted from the audience. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the presentation. The audience is banned from wearing any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the presentation. Competitors, can you begin when you're ready?
Hello, so I'm Kevin, this is Betty, and this is Jacqueline, and we're going to present to you a product called New You. So, in a nutshell, what we do is we provide medical services to minors who need them. Particularly, we provide physiotherapy to help these minors reverse injuries they may have and prevent possible loss of employment in the future. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Before that, I want you to all close your eyes for a second, and I want you to think about something. Imagine you are now, let's forget your professional life, and imagine you're a minor. Imagine minus 20 degrees outside, you're freezing, you're working your butt off. Life's tough. It's a lot different than what you're used to. Now, I want you to open your eyes again, and this is the situation you're in now. You're in a remote area with a ton of other minors. You live pretty far from everyone else. In some cases, you're very, very isolated. In a good case, maybe you're an hour away from the others. And during the day when you work, some of you guys go to work, and some of you are staying back, and then you get some sort of rotation shift. You guys end up working really, really hard. So imagine now you bend over just to tie your shoelace, something completely normal, and you pull your back. This is something that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it really isn't, because you're working so hard all the time that anything like this can just trigger something that can prevent you from doing work for a while. And this is a pretty big problem, because if you can't work, you can lose your bonus, and someone in the end is going to be held accountable. Whether it's you, your boss, some other one of your colleagues, you don't know, but someone's going to be held accountable. We are here to help. What we want to do is come to these mining sites and provide a physiotherapy service to help reverse these issues. We want to make sure that, when you go to tie your shoelace, something simple, you're not going to pull your back because you're not going to have these lingering issues. We want to make sure that when you're doing things, you know you're doing things properly and you're not getting hurt trying to do these things. And we want to make sure you're in the right shape so that you're not at ease of getting hurt. So with that, we are asking for $2.5 million for 20% of our business. As we mentioned before, I'm Kevin, I'm the CEO of the company. This is Betty, she's going to be the CFO, and she'll talk to you later about the financials. And this is Jacqueline, she's the CMO, and she'll talk to you about how we're going to implement our plan and some of the marketing that's behind it. So, now I just want to talk a bit about the opportunity analysis and how we found this opportunity that we think is just a huge untapped potential in the mining industry. Okay, so in the mining industry, there's 4 areas that are listed right there. There's mining equipment we could have looked at, transportation, goods to sell to workers, and services for workers. So, breaking these down, the mining equipment industry, it's a really, really competitive industry. We didn't really want to try and get into it. It's just there's not, margins aren't good, chances of success are pretty low. Transportation, we would have had to come and ask you for some ridiculous number, and you probably would have laughed us off saying you would have no chance in that industry. There's already established professionals. Point is, we didn't want to do really large operating costs. And then there's goods for workers, and again, it's a highly competitive industry. There's tons of established competitors, and it just wasn't a very viable market. But then there's services for workers. And in particular, we wanted to look at the medical part. Internet phones, security, waste disposal, catering, they were all other parts that we had options in, but the medical industry, it had just way better opportunities for us. There's a lack of this service just doesn't exist currently, well, the other ones are already existing opportunities or establishments there. And this is an inherently dangerous job. So it makes a lot of sense for us to try and work with something where we can help reverse that. And employee compensation is high, so we get a chance to make some money from that. And most importantly, this really falls on our values. So you're getting a lot of passion and hard work that's going to come from us. And we know the social trends right now are really moving and allowing this just to be a huge opportunity. And we want to go and give it our all. We don't want to be in something that we know is profitable, but that we're not going to give our all to. So, how big is the market? So if you imagine about 13 projects and 1,000 workers on each of those projects, maybe 20% of those need physio. And this number comes from actually my parents, they work in the construction industry, and I tend to see people get injured quite often. So 20% needing some sort of physiotherapy service is pretty conservative given the number of injuries in that scenario. And they're going to pay about $75 weekly for these appointments. And when you put that over 52 weeks, multiply them all together, you get a $10.1 million market in Saskatchewan. You can times this by 13 to get all of Canada, multiply that by 10 to get the US, and you can see that's a pretty big market we have to look at here. So now I'm just going to talk to you a bit more about the product and just really make sure you understand what it is we're talking about. Oh, I feel press here and down. Oh, it is. Okay, so in essence, it's not a very, very complicated. There's not a lot going on, but I want to make sure you really, really get it. So there's two physiotherapists we just have there, and then there's the mining site. What's going to happen is we're going to allow these physiotherapists to set up shop in these mining sites. And when they set up there, someone's going to be, or the miners are going to be able to come in and go in, and they'll be walking from, minus 20 outside, they're freezing, they're working really hard, into a nice place. Almost imagine kind of a male spa. Something really nice where they can go into, feel comfort, get the treatment they need, and then they'll go back outside and realize, okay, you know what? That was a really special place. I really appreciate being there. This life is very, very hard, and I really like being in this sort of scenario. So that's what our product is going to do. And in terms of the pains it's going to, we're going to mitigate and stuff, I'm just going to pass it on to Jack and talk to you a little bit about it.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Where's it going?
We're going to actually get to that a little bit, but we can talk to it now if you want. Betty can speak to it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So the $2.5 million is essentially to fund us through our growth phase. Initially it's set up. We are a service-based business, so it is quite expensive to hire practitioners, especially sending them to very remote locations. We know that in urban centers, physiotherapists typically charge about $32 an hour in terms of wages. And so we're trying to pay them $45 to entice them to cut to these quite remote locations in order to attract the best quality talent. So again, the cost of their service is quite expensive. The other cost will include flying them out. We do understand that not everyone wants to live in, northern Saskatchewan, so they do probably want to come home to see their family. So we're expecting to do a 3-week on, 1-week off sort of rotational shift for these physiotherapists. So that's another major cost. And then aside from management, the other major cost you can see on screen here are going to be the cost of the equipment that we're going to need to purchase as well. Physiotherapy equipment is quite expensive. However, this is a one-time cost that would be depreciated over about 10 years or so. So this only encouraged when we open up a new clinic.
Okay, so a question. You talked about flying physiotherapists out there. Where do you have a spot for accommodations? Where do you stay?
It's a great question. So we do see that some mining sites are located fairly close to some First Nations or Métis villages that we do expect to have rental locations open up. Otherwise, if we are on a mining site that is not near a location with actual housing, we will be renting out trailers and be furnishing them so that they can stay there as well.
Where would you trailers?
So we'd be able to rent them from various locations. There are a number of services that offer trailer rentals.
And the cost of that is your...
Yeah, so you can see that trailers are, it should go on this list. I think they're included in the rent aspect there.
My question is, who pays for the physiotherapy services of the mining company or the individual miners?
Yeah, so for the actual payment of physiotherapy services, we're expecting that these miners actually have great healthcare plans provided, of course, by the mining companies themselves. So those will be covering the majority of the costs. If there is a discrepancy between what they can pay and what the miners are supposed to pay for these services, then we do see the miners being willing to pay this because they are making $100,000 plus a year, and to pay for our service is going to be quite a minimal amount to get that recovery that they really need to be able to complete their job and get paid again with their salary. So we see it as a very minimal cost for them to incur. Great, so I'm just going to move back and talk a little bit more about who our customers are. So we have 2 sets of customers. The first is these mine employees, and then the second is also the First Nation and Métis communities that these mine sites are often close to. So because they're in remote locations, there is a need for these medical services. We are looking at sort of the services that are currently provided. We did see that there was hotels, there was recreation centers, there was gas stations. However, there was a huge lack of medical services available. I mean, these mining sites usually have one medical doctor that they're able to service for these 1,000 to 2,000 employees. And this is not enough, and especially since these physiotherapists are going to be specialized in these chronic injuries. Not those one-time serious conditions, but those ongoing conditions that people need to fix in order to have a healthy and comfortable lifestyle. So the minor employees do receive, yes?
Do you have partners in First Nation and Métis communities?
So what we are planning to do in order to establish those partnerships is we are going to be hiring a sales representative who's going to be able to go out to these communities and contact these community leaders as well as the mining sites to establish that relationship. So that's going to be done within the first 6 months, and we really do see this as just providing a benefit to them. I mean, there's absolutely no cost to these First Nations or these community individuals, because we are just going to be setting up in their community, providing them the service, and they can use their benefits to pay for that service. So moving on, for our positioning right now, we do see our service is extremely different from what is currently available. So New U is going to be very convenient and also ensure a high recovery rate. Right now, we do have those on-site medics. However, the recovery rate is slightly lower because they aren't specialized in these chronic pains, but more so those serious injuries. We also see self-treatment as an option. However, that is very risky, as I'm sure some of you may know, because you aren't sure what exercises you need to do in order to ensure that recovery is 100%. And lastly is the nearest town physio. However, we know that some of these sites are located extremely far away from any sort of medical center, and so that's going to be very inconvenient for these miners to go to. They work long hours. They got off at about 7 p.m. and start work again at 6 a.m. So they're going to want to use that time to relax and do something that they want to do. They're not going to want to be traveling an hour into town to go for an hour physio appointment. So I'm going to pass it off to Betty now, who's going to go a little bit more in depth in the financials. Yes, of course.
So the uptake assumptions you have with these miners, they are the ones personally paying or their health programs paying. The salesperson is going to partner with the First Nations. How are you actually going to get uptake? Have you factored in how many people won't end up showing up because they're tired? And really, my big thing I'd like you to address is how do you actually end up getting people to pay for prevention? Because it sounds like what you're doing. So
Yeah, wonderful. So that's actually going to be covered in the financials. So I'm going to let Betty address it, and that's going to be covered by our utilization rate. So you put that in because we don't expect 100% utilization right away, as you've mentioned. So that's built into the financials. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Okay, so moving on to the financial side. Here we go. So you're all probably wondering how we're making money first off. So what we're planning to do is charging $75 per half-hour appointment. Now, we can take a look at the break-even analysis to figure out how many miners or construction workers we need per day in order to actually be able to break even on the cost we're incurring. So we calculated a fixed cost for the 3-week rotation period where the physiotherapists come in. That includes all the costs of their wages, the food they eat, the rent that they're incurring, the secretary that's going to be needed to support them in this office. Comes to about $10,000 over those 3 weeks. And at $75 per appointment, this means we're going to need to see about 6.5 appointments per day. That's about 3 hours. And this means that we'll need to see about 40% utilization in order to break even. And we are hoping to hit this within our first year. Now, taking a look at the actual mining sites, we see that large mining sites are around 2,500 people, going down to the smaller ones that are about 300 people. We're seeing an average of about 1,000 workers per mining site. Now, looking at 45.5 weekly appointments that are needed to break even, this means that we need to see about 4.5% of these mining workers or construction workers coming in. So it's about 1 in 22, which is far lower than what Kevin has mentioned as being the average of about 1 in 5 that we see in these very physical labor, these labor industries. So what does our revenues look like then? So in our first year, we are hoping to open 13 sites within Saskatchewan, mostly surrounding the potash and uranium mining industries. And from there on, we're taking a very aggressive growth plan. We're opening 10 new sites per year. And the beauty of our business model is that it doesn't necessarily just apply to mining. We can use this in essentially any remote location of very physical, hard labor. So anywhere that perhaps requires massive construction, or maybe on oil rigs in Alberta or in Newfoundland and Labrador, this can very easily be scaled up and replicated across many, many areas. So in year 5 then, in 2018, we are hoping to see about 53 sites at this point in time, where we're seeing about $37 million in revenues.
How did you come up with 13 sites? What was your...
Sure, so we've seen that there's currently 5 potash sites that are in development right now in Saskatchewan across 8 companies. And we're assuming that these 8 companies already probably have an existing mining site. That's why we're looking to expand mining operations. So we're assuming
conservative estimate, about 13 sites right now in Saskatchewan. There are most likely more, but we want to spread our numbers to serve it.
So, if I'm a physiotherapist, what's your sell to me as why do I want to work for you guys as opposed to maybe staying somewhere warm and relatively south?
Yeah, so I can address that for you. And I think I'll just jump to the end of our presentation, which Kevin will help me out with. Great. So, that's actually one of the risks that we've considered. So, why on earth would these physiotherapists want to move to a very cold location and work these long hours? So, we are expecting a high turnover. That is something that we have factored into our costs, and it's something that we're going to be doing. We're constantly going to be recruiting. So, one of the initial things that we want to do is that we want to ensure that we have this strong HR team that's going to be recruiting consistently. Second, we want to have partnerships established with trade schools for postgraduate program. So lots of schools in Canada actually send their graduates to 2-3-year programs right after school so that they can get that initial training that they need to be very established in the industry. And we see this as a perfect opportunity to get those hours in place. The third thing is a very attractive salary. So we are planning on paying these physiotherapists $45 an hour, which is extremely competitive. I know across Canada, the average is about $32 per hour for that job. And so they're looking at a much higher margin on their wage. So that alone, if we're expecting high turnover, we're not expecting them to stay for a very long time, come in for a few years, get that amazing salary that they're able to get through us, and then leave, and we can recruit more people. We are going to be having an ongoing recruiting process, we do have a budget set aside for that. Yes?
Question, the health and safety field is probably the fastest emerging in the mining sector, and there's a number of companies that are working in this space, but this is relatively unique. Have you considered alignment or partnerships with existing medical service providers who don't provide that to provide
So, one of the things we talked about was just looking at other medical industries, perhaps like looking at can we bring doctors into these areas? And so we actually wanted to come to you guys and talk to you about your expertise and maybe help us bring those sorts of alignments together. We just chose physiotherapy because it's like we know we can get in there. But if you guys can help us bring in more and grow this even further, we would love that.
So I've got a question on talking about risk. Many of the mines have a week-on, week-off schedule.
Yeah.
What would prevent somebody from just going to physiotherapy that's a little bit cheaper in their hometown?
Great question. So the $75 rate is actually competitive to the other services provided. I know in the past I've paid $100+ for a physio appointment, so we are keeping the prices relative to the competitors. Secondly, we do know that 1 week off they have, they're not going to be wanting to spend at the doctor. Who wants to go to the doctor, right, when you have time off? You want to be spending time with your friends and your family. That week is going to fly by for them. They're not going to want to spend that hour in a physio appointment. So we are actually factoring that in, and we also are giving the physios actually the 3 weeks on, 1 week off, because we want them to have that time off as well. And that's where we positioned ourselves as being convenient as well as a recovery. Because we want the mining workers to use their free time that they have in the mines when they don't have anything else to do, to be getting these processes out of the way. Going to their physio appointments, doing those things that they're not necessarily going to want to do on that precious 1 week they have off.
What happens when some of your physiotherapists end up doing a rather poor job, word starts getting around? How do you address that? Because you've got to ramp up in rural areas, you've got a lot of logistical things, you've got a lot of hands-off management assuming in all this. What have been your approaches to address that?
That's a great risk, and it's something that I think we need to delve into a little bit more. However, we are going to be having a sales representative at each mining site, and they're going to be the person, as well as an office staff, who's going to be overseeing the customer relations and the operations. And so we do want to ensure that our physiotherapists are doing a good job. And I think that's a process that's going to have kinks at first, but it's going to work its way out. We're going to start getting better physios as we become more established. Also, the partnership with trade schools is going to be extremely important because we know that they have great programs to build up their physiotherapists. And so by gaining those physiotherapists who are coming out of those schools, we're going to ensure that we have very high quality practitioners. Okay, so we're just going to jump back now into the financials.
Who's running the site?
Pardon me?
Who's running the site?
The physiotherapy site?
Yeah.
So we're going to have the sales representative there and then the 2 physiotherapists. And it is quite hands-off because we're going to be overseeing the operations of all those 13 sites, but we're going to be putting the physiotherapists in charge. We want them to have a high autonomy. We want them to be able to be responsible for what they're doing. And I mean, that's also a benefit for them to come into this job. If they're coming right out of school or they're looking to get that certification, they're also going to be able to practice as many hours as they want to and really gain that experience to be an expert in their field.
They need to have financial skills as well.
Sorry?
They need to have office management skills as well.
Oh no, they're not going to be in charge of office management because we are going to have that secretary in the office who's going to be taking care of the administrative matters, and then the sales representatives do the customer relations, and then us here, of course, me doing the marketing, Betty doing the financials, and Kevin doing the information are going to take care of the organization overall.
Perfect. All right, so moving on then, looking at the profit growth by opening 10 new sites per year, by year 2018, we are seeing a profits of $14.6 million. And as I mentioned, this is a service-based business, so we have very high fixed costs. But aside from that, there's very little variable cost per customer that comes in. So once we see that our reputation does become stronger, we see that more and more brand loyalty from the construction workers and the mining people, we do expect our utilization rates to go up. And then by year 5, we are hoping to see 8% utilization coming into about $14 million. So what are the exit opportunities for New You then? So in 5 years' time, we see that we have ramped up our company quite a bit, and we see 3 options as being available to us. One would be to take our company public, do an IPO, and potentially use this money to expand even further towards perhaps North America. Another option would be to sell to a private equity firm, again allowing us to really ramp up our operations and gain some more expertise and skills that we need on board. And the final opportunity for us would be to sell to a major healthcare services provider. There are a large number of them, especially in the United States, and we do see us as being a very strategic partnership with them in order for them to ramp up their services, which addresses the question earlier as well on potential partnership. So where are we valuing our company at? We're valuing our company in 5 years at 5 times our earnings of $14.6 million, giving us a total valuation of $73 million. Now, for you as investors, for you as investors, you have invested $2.5 million with us if you choose to invest. And at 20% of our valuation, this will see a gain of $14.6 million, less your initial investment, to give you a 4.8 times return on your initial investment of $2.5 million. So this is a fantastic opportunity for you as well. And I'm going to pass it over back to Jacqueline to speak more to the implementation of our plan.
Great, so we have a comprehensive timeline here of what our steps are initially going to be. I just want to highlight a few things. So the first is the hiring of those HR managers. As we discussed earlier, it is extremely important that we get those very good and qualified physiotherapists into practice their service with us. So that's going to be the first initial step we're going to take. Next is recruiting those physios, making sure that we're getting the good quality physios, as well as it is ensuring that it's an ongoing process. Thirdly is when we're actually going to start service. So that's going to be after 6 months. And lastly is to evaluate international expansion or those exit opportunities that Betty's just mentioned. So what are our milestones? First is to hire that HR manager, second to recruit the physios, and third to begin service. If we ensure all these things are done in a timely manner, we're going to be ensuring that we have revenue generation. So as I discussed earlier, we do have the risk of the high turnover. There's also the lower than expected utilization. However, we are catering to quite a large market, as well as we want to partner with these mines and communities by having that sales representative to discuss with them. And lastly is low employee morale. However, we are expecting a higher turnover, and we're giving them that 1 week off every 3 weeks. So I've already addressed the HR and high turnover consideration. So just in conclusion, we want to thank you very much for your time here today, and we hope that you invest with New You to help all these miners and local communities really rehabilitate, restore, and rejuvenate. Thank you.